60 billion. That is the figure that shook a nation awake. In the heart of West Africa, in a landlocked strip of red earth and dust, Captain Ibrahim Traoré stood before cameras and declared that beneath the soil of Burkina Faso lay over 1,200 tons of pure gold, a treasure valued at more than 60 billion United States dollars. Enough, some said, to rewrite the story of a people long defined by struggle. But history offers a cruel reminder. In Congo, in Niger, in Angola, the same promises glittered before being buried under war, exploitation, and despair. Is gold a blessing? Or is it the oldest curse Africa knows? The hall erupted when ministers spoke of schools, clinics, and clean water. But outside, in the streets of Ouagadougou, questions whispered. Will this wealth finally belong to us? Or will it once again be carted away in foreign trucks bound for Paris, Beijing, Toronto? One captain dares to swear otherwise, yet the world waits, pen in hand, ready to sign away futures. Stay with us. This is more than a headline. It is the turning of a page in history. Subscribe and walk with us, because what comes next may change the fate of Africa itself. It began on a blistering morning in Ouagadougou. Cameras clicked, reporters leaned forward, and the air in the press hall felt heavier than the Sahel sun outside. After months of geological surveys, the government announced what had been whispered in villages and mining towns for generations. The soil of Burkina Faso concealed more than 1,200 tons of gold. Valued at over 60 billion United States dollars, it was a number that could dwarf the nation's annual budget many times over. The Minister of Energy delivered the words with a steady voice, but the weight of history clung to each syllable. This gold, he declared, will not fill foreign banks. It will serve the barefoot child in Dori, the farmer in Banfora, the mother in Bobo-Dioulasso. The hall erupted in applause. Yet beyond the cameras, in the crowded markets, skepticism lingered. One young man leaning on a rusted motorbike muttered, "We heard the same in Niger when they found uranium." What changed for them? His friend nodded grimly. What shines abroad often leaves shadows here. The facts were staggering. Reuters called it Africa's new gold frontier. Bloomberg speculated that if managed correctly, Burkina Faso's gross domestic product could rise tenfold. The Financial Times warned of a rush of foreign mining companies already circling. Within hours, delegations from Canada, the United Arab Emirates, and Australia booked flights, briefcases filled with contracts. But the gold was not only numbers and headlines. In Kaya, elders gathered beneath a neem tree, speaking softly. "This is our treasure," one man said. Another replied, "Gold does not glitter the same for the poor. It blinds them." Their words carried the memory of Congo, where mountains of coltan and gold should have built schools but instead fueled militias. They remembered Niger, whose uranium lit Paris but left Niamey in the dark. They remembered Angola, whose oil built skyscrapers in Luanda, while 40% of the countryside lived without clean water. When Captain Ibrahim Traoré addressed the nation, he struck the table with his fist. "Do you think Niger chose darkness? Do you think Congo chose blood? Do you think Angola chose hunger? No. They were trapped by contracts signed in silence, far from their people. We will not walk into that trap." His words carried the echo of Thomas Sankara, the revolutionary who once declared, "He who feeds you controls you. He who mines you owns you." The captain vowed that no kilogram of gold would leave the soil without returning value to the people. His pledge ignited hope, but also sharpened the stakes. For if Burkina Faso was truly to guard 60 billion against global appetites, it would not only be a matter of resources, but of sovereignty itself. And so the stage was set. A nation long dismissed as poor now sat on a treasure vast enough to tempt the world's most powerful capitals. In the streets, chants rose in support. Yet in quiet corners, one question echoed like a drumbeat in the dust. Could one leader truly shield a nation from the hunger of empires? The announcement of $60 billion in hidden wealth did not merely shake the corridors of government. It rattled every corner of Burkina Faso. In Ouagadougou, crowds filled Independence Square, fists raised high, chanting the captain's name. In villages near Kaya and Bulsa, mothers huddled around radios, listening to promises that their children would finally drink clean water and walk to school with shoes. Yet hope was not the only emotion. Doubt flowed through the markets like the dust in the wind. One miner, his palms hardened by 20 years of digging with bare hands, looked into the camera of a visiting journalist and asked, "When they carry it away in machines, will my children still study under leaking roofs?" His words captured the paradox that every Burkinabe felt. Pride at discovery, fear of betrayal. The reaction abroad was swift. Financial Times dubbed the nation Africa's new gold frontier. Reuters reported a surge of requests for exploration licenses from Canadian and Australian companies. Bloomberg analysts predicted foreign investment worth billions if the government opened its gates. Yet those same headlines carried warnings. Foreign firms rarely come without strings, and contracts often drain wealth faster than mines can dig it. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, however, seemed prepared for confrontation. In June 2024, he announced the nationalization of 5 major gold mines, transferring them into the hands of Sopameib, the state-owned mining company. The move stunned boardrooms from Toronto to Sydney. "Better to buy our dignity," he declared, "than to sell our souls cheaply." For supporters, these words were a rallying cry. For critics, they were a declaration of economic war. Across the country, the response was electric. In Bulsa, miners lifted their helmets into the air, chanting victory songs. In student halls of Ouagadougou, heated debates flared. One young man shouted, "Traoré is too radical. He will scare away investors." A woman rose to reply, her voice trembling with conviction. "And what did investors give Niger? Uranium for Paris and darkness for Niamey. Do you want the same fate?" The room erupted, voices clashing, hope and fear intertwined. Internationally, the pressure mounted. Ambassadors arrived carrying polished briefcases, consultants whispered of development packages, and lobbyists promised billions. Yet beneath the polite words lay the familiar machinery. Exploit first, apologize later. When reports surfaced that a Canadian mining conglomerate had funneled profits through offshore accounts, licenses were suspended. When a UAE-backed consortium failed to disclose subcontracting deals, their contracts were revoked. The government's statement was blunt: no transparency, no license. The defiance spread like wildfire. On walls in Ouagadougou, graffiti declared, "Our gold, our future." At rallies, thousands raised fists to the sky, echoing the captain's vow. "Not 1 kilogram of gold will leave this land without bringing value back." The atmosphere was charged, like a storm gathering over the Sahel. Yet with every roar of celebration came the whisper of unease. Could such bold defiance withstand the weight of global lawsuits? Would investors retaliate with sanctions or capital flight? Could a landlocked nation, with fragile borders and limited resources, truly stand against the polished men in distant boardrooms? The crowd in Independence Square cheered with thunderous voices, but the silence in foreign embassies was heavier still. The question was no longer whether gold could change Burkina Faso. It was whether Burkina Faso could survive the price of saying no. The discovery of $60 billion in gold was never just about numbers on paper. It was about lives lived in the dust of mines, in the breath of children, in the aching hands of farmers. The promise of wealth came hand in hand with tragedy. In April 2025, a tunnel collapsed in Pama, burying 17 artisanal miners alive. Mothers wailed, fathers dug with bare hands, but no life was pulled from the rubble. The nation mourned not just the miners, but the truth that unregulated wealth exacts its price in blood. Within weeks, inspectors reported poisoned wells near Kaya. The once clear water carried a reddish tint, heavy with chemicals from processing. Women lifted buckets and asked, "If even water becomes poison, how do we feed our children?" The World Health Organization later confirmed a 31% rise in respiratory illness among children living near mines. In Gawa's hospital, corridors overflowed with coughing bodies. A doctor, helpless without medicine, whispered, "The dust is stronger than our lungs." Captain Ibrahim Traoré responded with decrees. Unregulated pits were shut down. Cyanide-based processing near rivers was banned. A state-funded purification unit was launched, but policy on paper could not erase the grief of poisoned rivers or collapsed tunnels. Still, he pressed forward. "If gold is to curse us," he declared, "let it remain buried. But if it is to serve us, then every child, every farmer, every mother will feel its weight in bread, in water, in dignity." The exploitation of children weighed heavily on his conscience. Inspectors had found girls as young as 12 carrying sacks of ore heavier than their own bodies, earning no more than $2 or $3 a day. Traoré thundered from the podium. "A child belongs in a classroom, not a tunnel. Any company found exploiting children will lose its license, not suspended, revoked." The Ministry of Education was ordered to provide scholarships to 5,000 children from mining regions, offering them books instead of burdens. The struggle was not only material, but cultural. Sacred Mossi sites, home to ancestral ceremonies for centuries, were bulldozed to make way for mining operations. Elders wept as drum houses collapsed into rubble. In response, heritage reserves were established, shielding cultural grounds from corporate bulldozers. "Gold may glitter," the captain told a rally, "but identity is priceless." Even with these reforms, challenges multiplied. Smugglers moved shipments through porous borders with Mali and Togo. Illegal exports bled the nation's wealth away in shadows. "Our borders leak like sieves," admitted the finance minister. Traoré replied with resolve. "We fight shadows with light. Every shipment must be tracked, every contract published. Let the people see who profits and who pays." By mid-2025, a special environmental police unit was deployed to raid clandestine pits and arrest smugglers. Mining companies were forced to fund clinics and clean water projects in the communities they exploited. A community development fund was created, receiving 20% of all gold profits, managed not by ministers, but by elected village councils. For the first time, farmers in Banfora debated whether to build a new well or a health clinic with their share of revenues. In Kaya, women demanded solar energy for their homes. One farmer said proudly, "For once, decisions are ours, not theirs." These measures marked more than temporary policies. They began to shape what many already called the Ibrahim Traoré Legacy, a legacy not defined solely by tons of gold or billions of dollars, but by whether children breathed clean air, whether women drew water untainted by poison, whether villages built futures with their own hands. Yet, in the stillness of night, the question pressed heavier than gold itself. Could such a legacy endure? Or would it be swallowed by the very curse it sought to defeat? The shockwaves of Burkina Faso's gold discovery did not stop at its borders. From Paris to Washington, from Beijing to Brussels, boardrooms and ministries recalculated their maps of influence. Headlines in European capitals framed the country as Africa's new gold frontier. The African Union and ECOWAS issued cautious statements, urging stability and regional cooperation, while behind closed doors, diplomats worried that Traoré's defiance could spread as a model for others. In Washington, analysts debated whether this was a bold path toward sovereignty or the first step into isolation. Some argued that nationalization and contract transparency could set a precedent across the continent, threatening established interests. Others warned that sanctions or capital flight might follow if the captain pressed further. China responded with its usual strategic ambiguity. State media described Burkina Faso as a challenging partner, acknowledging opportunities while hinting at risks. In contrast, Western outlets carried a sharper tone, questioning whether foreign investors would tolerate conditions such as mandatory refineries on Burkinabe soil or profit-sharing funds controlled by village councils. To critics abroad, these demands seemed radical. To many Africans, they sounded like dignity long overdue. The United Nations raised alarms about environmental risks, reminding the world that the Sahel was already on the brink of ecological collapse. Yet in Ouagadougou, the refrain was different. This was not merely about protecting rivers or forests. It was about reclaiming history. And so the world confronted a paradox. Was Burkina Faso charting a reckless path that could isolate it from partnerships? Or was it pioneering a new framework for African sovereignty? Could this experiment become more than a nation struggle? Could it inspire a continental awakening? As debates raged, Captain Traoré spoke not only of immediate survival, but of a horizon far beyond. He called it a vision stretching toward mid-century, a dream where Africa no longer exported raw wealth, but refined, transformed, and consumed it within its own borders. To his followers, this was not fantasy but necessity. They called it the Ibrahim Traoré Vision 2050, a blueprint for a continent tired of bleeding value into foreign banks. But visions, however bold, face storms. Lawsuits gather like clouds. Lobbyists whisper in gilded halls. Diplomats draft resolutions in faraway capitals. Would the world allow a new vision to rise from the Sahel, or would it crush it before it could breathe? The gold beneath Burkina Faso is not simply a resource, it is a crossroad. From this moment forward, two paths stretch out across the Sahel like roads cut through red earth. One leads to the familiar cycle. Contracts signed in silence, resources shipped abroad, rivers poisoned, and futures sold cheap. The other is uncharted, carved with calloused hands, guarded by watchful eyes, demanding sacrifice but promising dignity. The risks are heavy. International lawsuits could drain national coffers. Investors might turn away, branding the country hostile to business. Powerful neighbors could exploit porous borders to smuggle wealth in the shadows. Even allies may hesitate, unsure whether bold defiance can sustain itself against the machinery of global finance. And yet the opportunities stand taller still. Nationalizing mines has already shifted power from foreign companies into Burkinabe hands. The policy of building refineries on home soil could capture value long shipped away to Zurich and Dubai. The Environmental Protection Unit may yet defend rivers and lungs, while scholarships and training could seed a generation of engineers, metallurgists, and geologists ready to shape their own destiny. In marketplaces across Ouagadougou, vendors whisper of hope. In Banfora, farmers debate whether to invest revenues in wells or clinics. In Kaya, women envision clean energy for their homes. Each decision, however small, signals a transformation. Wealth no longer dictated by distant suits, but by the people who till the land. This is the moment where slogans must become structures, where chants must turn into policy, where promises must harden into laws. The captain's words ring still. If gold is to curse us, let it remain buried. But if it is to serve us, then every child, every farmer, every mother will feel its weight in bread, in water, in dignity. The question now hangs heavy in the air. Will Burkina Faso stand as proof that a small, landlocked nation can break free from the chains of dependency? Or will it fall? Another chapter in Africa's long book of squandered wealth. As the torches burn outside the palace and chants echo through the streets, the road forward lies not in destiny, but in choice. And the world is watching to see which path will be taken. The story of Burkina Faso's gold is not only about the metal beneath its soil, it is about the weight of history pressing down and the possibility of writing a different future. For centuries, Africa's treasures have been carried away in ships and contracts, leaving behind only scars. Today, Captain Ibrahim Traoré stands at a threshold, holding a pen rather than a begging bowl, vowing that this chapter will be written differently. But history does not bend easily. The examples of Congo, Niger, and Angola echo as warnings of what happens when resources are treated as curses rather than blessings. And yet, in the chants of students, in the debates of farmers, in the raised fists of miners, there is a different rhythm pulsing across the Sahel. It is the sound of a nation daring to believe that sovereignty is not a dream, but a choice. This choice will define the Ibrahim Traoré legacy. Will it be remembered as the moment a leader stood firm, insisting that not 1 kilogram of gold would leave without value returned? Or will it dissolve into the same shadows of dependency that swallowed nations before? Legacies are not written in speeches. They are etched in water that runs clean, in schools that stand tall, in children who breathe freely. Beyond the present struggle lies a horizon. Some call it the Ibrahim Traoré Vision 2050, a vision of an Africa that refines its own resources, educates its own experts, and shapes its own destiny. It is not a fantasy. It is a demand whispered by generations who refused to be silent any longer. And so, the question returns to all of us. Can one small, landlocked nation light a fire that spreads across a continent? If Burkina Faso proves that wealth can serve dignity rather than chains, then the Ibrahim Traoré legacy will not belong to one captain alone. It will belong to Africa itself. Do not look away. Share this story, subscribe, and let your voice be part of the chorus, because this is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of a future written with our own hands.